We got 3 different duels in this episode, right? With an Inquisitor, 2 Padawans, and with 2 Masters.
Just an epic lightsaber battle scene, and I think that that's part of what makes this the Star Wars I've been waiting for. The choreography was so good. Their stances and their styles are changing, and she takes advantage of the environment, which is a very Anakin raised during the Clone Wars as a Jedi thing.
And if the ref's not looking, you can kick him a couple of times.
Yeah. Simpsons did it.
Krypton to Alderaan, Krypton to Alderaan, Krypton to Alderaan, Krypton to Alderaan.
Welcome everyone to Krypton to Alderaan. I'm Joey, your Star Wars lover, and with me is Royish Good Looks.
Hello, podcast. Hello, Joey.
Hello, and we're the podcast that analyzes nerdy pop culture stuff, but it's mostly Star Wars. And today we will be talking about, screaming about, crying, throwing up about Ahsoka Part 4, Fallen Jedi. But first, if you like what we have to say here, stick around and check out some of our other episodes and then subscribe so you get notified about other conversations and other things we talk about, whether it's about Ahsoka or otherwise. I know every content creator says this. Smash that subscribe button so I get more subscribers and followers.
I thought we were the only ones.
And to some extent, it's always very self-serving. And we like that too. Like, I love seeing our numbers go up. But I think one of our whys as Krypton to Alderaan, the brand, is building a community. And that's also something we would like to develop and interact with you all. And we want to hear what you have to say. And we do have some fans that always return and comment on videos, which has been incredible to see. So thank you all very much who do that. We'd love to get more of an interactive following and community. That's what we're all about here. That's part of like our why and our brand.
Talk to us in the comments. We'll be there.
Yeah, we love interacting with you all. And that's all I have to say about that. What do you think about that, Royce?
Let's punch it.
Let's punch it. All right. There's another theme that's recurring with this show. So we've talked about what does it mean to be a Jedi, you know? And we're going to talk about that a little bit. Another theme that's recurring for me personally is this the best Star Wars? Is this the Star Wars I've been waiting for? And I got to tell you, yes, it is.
Is that the theme of the show, or is that the title of this podcast episode?
What's the most clickbaity title? Look, as much as I've talked about community building, how can we get the most clicks? I think I also already named an episode, Is Ahsoka the Best Star Wars, or something like that. But it's what I've been waiting for. It's amazing. I even said it in an Instagram story. Hey, another thing, go follow us on Instagram. This episode touched on that so much for me. I'm aghast. I'm speechless. But I also simultaneously have a lot to say.
I was going to say, it doesn't really sound like you're speechless.
Normally we have to cut a lot of silent spots. Maybe we're going to have to put in some pauses. Boy, oh boy, was this episode phenomenal. I'm going to provide a lot of evidence, I think, for why.
Lightsabers. I rest my case.
That's pretty much it. But I'm going back to a thing that we used to do, which we've gotten away from, but it was that I would ask you how you felt about the episode at the top of the show. So, how did you feel about the episode at the top of our show?
Based on our conversation last week, where we're like, hey, this episode was kind of short, and it leaves you off in this cliffhanger. Well, I like that episode, but it was different than, maybe the other 2 premieres that were longer and kind of like smushed together a little bit more. But now we're on episode 4 and we're off to the races. This was like almost the same format as last week, where boom, at the end, you get a little stinger for next week. Tune in to see more, because you got to see what happens next. I was totally satisfied with that. I love the linear storytelling like you brought up last week. Pick up where we left off, leave off on a cliffhanger, and continue the story. I will say I'm a little bit nervous to see what happens in episode 5. Because I think if we go through the series for the Disney Plus streaming Star Wars shows, episode 5 tends to be the cameo episode. I think that's when Ahsoka originally showed up in Mandalorian season 2. I think that's when the Mandalorian showed up in the book of Boba Fett. So episode 5 is our, conspiracy theory of when things tend to get potentially derailed in the series. So we'll see. I know we're talking about next week. We're jumping ahead of ourselves. But I loved that this week kind of echoed last week, and we're moving forward. And I thought there was certainly a lot of good Jedi stuff which is to speak to your point of this show is for me. I love it. Who doesn't love Jedi stuff? So I'm in. I'm satisfied with that. And we got a lot of great spaceship stuff.
We got to see the Ghost. This was our first look at the Ghost in live action since this show has started. We've only seen the Phantom, I'm pretty sure, until this episode. So even that was goosebumps on me. A couple of things here. One, episode 5, yes, maybe in the series history, but Empire, come on. That's what we got. That's what we got to work with. Also, secondly, I'm a little concerned you keep using the word satisfied because I don't think that satisfied fully encapsulates how I feel about the ending specifically and this episode. And I really need us to be on the same page here. So
you can count on me.
Ooh, good stuff.
Or can you?
Or can you?
We'll put in a Ron Howard narrator. He couldn't.
Yeah. Yep. Okay. So I think we're talking really fast here. Everyone can sense our excitement. I'm really stoked to get into this. I do think I want to pull on that thread a little bit more of what does it mean to be a Jedi? Because we do see a little bit more of it, I think, in this episode, and I think differently than how we've been talking about it so far. But these questions still surrounding Sabine, I really like that we're like kind of peeling back the layers as we answer this question. It feels very different from Mandalorian asking, what does it mean to be a Mandalorian? Because we're getting more and more into Sabine as we go. I don't know, something just feels different there. Maybe it's because I like Jedi more, but she's both. And anyway, I think a big theme within that kind of thread of this episode is the test. We have seen every single Jedi and Jedi adjacent character in Star Wars, like main character, have this moment of being tested. And that's where the can I count on you? Yes, but maybe not thing comes in. So what did you see? That was the main thing I saw for this like thread we've been pulling on.
Yeah, I mean, the whole thing is Ahsoka and Sabine, you've got to work together. Huyang saying, stick together. You'll thank me.
Yeah. I love that also.
Not the sassy droid, Joey says.
Yeah, well, they were also sassy to him. Okay, let's talk about that scene. I love when he says that. I do think like we were going into this moment of being like, oh, is something going to happen? And he says, do me a favor, stick together, which also like hit me emotionally. Like he cares. He cares about them. He says, you two always did better that way, in my opinion. And then they like bow to him and they also have that fun little like team bonding moment. Ahsoka smiles and Sabine says together and she bows and he's like, oh, very good. You know, like, don't mock me, just stick together.
Yeah, I kind of read that like they were brushing him off a little bit, you know? And they're totally foreshadowing that they're gonna go on separate paths and they end up doing that. And it costs them a lot in the end. There's all this, like, you gotta listen a little bit more. You gotta listen to Huyang. Sabine's gotta listen to Ahsoka, you know? And maybe, I don't know what this stuff with Anakin at the end, I know we'll get to it, but like, there's something here of the like learning from your older generation, but also following, to quote something from that Book of Boba Fett episode with the Mando, Ahsoka tells Mando, sometimes the student guides the master. There's a different way to do things, and sometimes maybe you do gotta trust the Padawan, the youngling, and maybe they not necessarily know better than you, but they have a different point of view, a certain point of view that maybe you need to respect from time to time. And they're trying to find a balance with this relationship with Ahsoka and Sabine and Huyang. They're all on totally different pages. Huyang wants to be the old Republic kind of Jedi guy, follow the rules. Ahsoka kind of does whatever she wants, but she was in that realm. And Sabine is this whole new generation of like, what does it mean to be a Jedi? I don't know. I guess you don't even need the freaking Force. So it's just a little confusing in that regard that like everybody's kind of in flux. No one's on the same page.
Right. That goes into what I'm saying here about the test, right? Even in universe and then also in another very meta way. Let's start with Luke. Didn't listen to Yoda. Failed in that cave on Dagobah. Rey didn't listen to Luke. Failed in that cave on Ahch-To. This is a recurring theme in Star Wars, and specifically we have seen it with like main character Jedi, Anakin, all over the place. And so much of that is wrapped up in this, like, what does it mean to be the Jedi? In the High Republic, there are these Jedi who like take kind of a rumspringa from the Jedi Order to go figure out how to live in the real world, and then they eventually come back. So there are all these tests involved with listening and learning from the previous generation, which in the real world we don't do. And also like Yoda saying the best teacher failure is, right? Not necessarily meaning we fail and then as individuals and then learn from it. But I think also the student learning from the master's failure. And I think that that might be coming up in the next episode of Ahsoka if she is interacting with Anakin, of Anakin relaying all of this. There are different ways to do things, but learn from obviously I made mistakes, right? Learn from mistakes, but also let your student guide you. I love this, and I love this conversation, and I love that Sabine was also tested in this way. And she chose wrong, like everyone else did. Luke submitted to fear. Rey submitted to fear and a desire to like know where she comes from and what her place is in all this, right? Anakin submitted to the fear of losing everything he loved again, a second time. There's so much of this wrapped up in it, and it's just continuing that thread for me. So I will also say that I was not like upset that Sabine made that choice. It's so very Star Wars to me. Like the person has to make a mistake in order to grow. And like you're saying, the master being led by the student, that might be how Sabine leads Ahsoka to Peridia, or if they even, if we see everybody go there or not. But I do think that there's a reconcilable relationship there, even though this is what Sabine chose. But I wasn't surprised. I wasn't put off. I wasn't upset that she made that choice.
Yeah, it seems like everybody has room to grow and learn from each other. I love the poetry moment of like, you're bringing up all this stuff with Yoda. Luke wants to leave and go save Han and Leia and Chewie and 3PO and whatever. And Yoda's like, if you honor what you fight for, you'll stay here and finish your training. If Sabine honored Ezra, she'd destroy the map, but she doesn't. She's got this attachment to Ezra. Luke had that attachment to Han and Leia. Of course, this is the tension that we need for a story to be told to us, that of course she's got to make the wrong decision. We're at episode 4, right? This is, an inciting incident sort of thing, right? It works really well when you're watching and you're like, do the right thing. Like, had she blown it up, and then what is Ahsoka going to fly out of the water at that moment? And they defeat Baylan and then the series is over halfway through the series. So it works well in the context of telling a story. But it's frustrating when you're watching because, come on, do the right thing. You and I, as like these 30-something-year-old dudes, like, come on, do better than that. Like, I think we're probably more identifying with Ahsoka in this realm. Or maybe we're Baylan and we're a little bit more jaded of like, I'm serving a greater purpose now,
Yeah.
But it's interesting to watch that unfold because you're like, just listen to Ahsoka. You guys should have worked as a team and you could have defeated your enemies one by one systematically and maybe actually save the day. But now you've put that off. But like you said, you'll fail at the moment and you'll learn from that as we go on. So it will be interesting to see how that shapes up. But also them calling this episode Fallen Jedi, it's like, well, what does that mean? Is this like her kind of, now she's on a ship with Baylan and Shin?
Right.
And all these bad guys, and she's going to meet Thrawn. They're not going to rescue Ezra, even though that's what Baylan said he's a man of his word. We don't know anything about Baylan, though. He says he's lost his faith. That doesn't sound like an honorable man to me. So very interesting threads that they're leaving there.
Oh, so much to say here. I don't necessarily think that she did the wrong thing. And I don't think Luke did the wrong thing. And I don't necessarily think that Anakin always did the wrong thing. I think the Jedi prescribed that this is the right thing to do from the perspective of the Jedi. They're going into that situation automatically thinking that they're doing the wrong thing. Whereas, like, if I were Luke, going to save my friends would take precedent over, and that has become like a trope in every sci-fi since then. Someone leaves their training, Avatar, The Last Airbender, Harry Potter, someone leaves their training to go fight for their friends. And is it the right thing or the wrong thing to do? But it always works out. Right? It always ends up being success in the end. Maybe not exactly in Empire, but then in Return of the Jedi. She's going to find Ezra, and then they can make it up as they go how to escape that situation, which is a very Star Wars Rebels thing. Like, we're going to break into the base and then figure out how to get out of the base, right? And I think that Baylan in this way is a reflection, the opposite of Ahsoka. He's saying almost the same things to Sabine, but he's on the kind of quote-unquote opposite side. He's lost his faith. Ahsoka kind of lost her faith because the Jedi Council specifically like persecuted her and she left and is now made to feel like she abandoned Anakin, and it's kind of like her fault. She's feeling remorse for that. They're both kind of on the same path, but maybe like Baylan's from the upside down. Maybe Baylan's the Vecna to Ahsoka's 11 or something like that. So I wouldn't necessarily say that I think she made the wrong choice, but it did come with consequences like Ahsoka falling off the cliff, and Sabine has no idea what happened to Hera. And then the really heartbreaking moment of Baylan reading her and saying, you feel like Ezra's the only family you have left. Whereas she has the Ghost crew, and she has Ahsoka, and she has Huyang. But for some reason, somehow along the way, she feels like Ezra's all that there is. I could see why she made the choice, and I don't think it's necessarily the wrong choice.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. It's like, I do like Baylan. It seems like you may be a little bit of a Baylan stan yourself. He pulls a Darth Plagueis on her is the way I read it, Oh, if you want to save your friend, the only way to do it is to become an agent of evil. That's kind of how I was reading that scene, as Baylan was like playing into everything that she wanted. How do you get someone to do what you want them to do? You want to be united with Ezra? Hey, join our crew. That's how I was looking at that was maybe a little bit more sinister than neutral, but we'll find out. We don't know.
We don't have any idea. I think he's a super interesting character, and I really want to know more.
He did defend her when Shin starts choking her. He's like, I gave her my word. So they did give you a clue.
He kept his word.
Yeah.
We don't necessarily know what reuniting with Ezra means. Like he says, you will be reunited with your friend. Well, what if he's dead, right? Or what if he's in
I never said he'd be, yeah. Ooh.
What if he's in a cell or something, right? Baylan's a super interesting character. We're getting to the point of we're going into episode 5. I want to know more about him, but I really don't want them to spend time giving us his backstory in the show. So maybe like some extra content or a comic book run or something like that I would love. But super interesting character. And I do think like both fell out of faith in the Jedi. And I want to know why. And he's also very much like, okay, this might be a silly little thing, but I started noticing when he and Ahsoka are about to battle and they both take their capes off, their attire is exactly the opposite. Right? She has her shoulders bare. He has these big hulking like knight armor on his shoulders. They're very much opposing each other in every way that I was putting together in that scene.
Even his fighting style is this very kind of classical style, and Ahsoka holds her saber, behind her back or whatever.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes. And he's very like knight. He's standing there. His stance with his sword is very like knight/baseball player, I guess.
Yeah.
But yeah, just super fascinating to see that anti-poetry, I guess. I don't really know what to call it, but both appealing to Sabine even in those moments of where she needs to make a choice. And both like coming from this society that like, I love the Jedi, but sometimes they were a little bit manipulative of people to get what they want. Oh, so good. It's also just so good, right? Like this is like, to write that and then to have us be able to like vamp about it for however long we've been doing is just incredible. And it's written really well. And some of it's just so intriguing and it makes us want to learn more. And it's like making me hungry for the next thing, right? And episode 5, Dave Filoni wrote and directed. I think we should say again, like episode 4, written by Dave Filoni. All of these episodes are written by Dave Filoni. And I think you can really tell. Next episode written and directed by Dave Filoni. So very excited to see where that goes. Another thing about Jedi indoctrination and kind of losing faith in the Jedi, we're going to go back a little bit to Ahsoka questioning Sabine and maybe that leading her, that being that moment of if you leave now to save your friends, you're giving up on everything that they fight for. Because Ahsoka, at 2 moments, she says, can I count on you? And Sabine says, you know you can. And then Ahsoka says, sometimes we have to do the right thing regardless of our personal feelings. And Sabine questions it. She says, do you really believe that? And Ahsoka takes pause because that's a very Jedi, it's true, but it's a very Jedi sentiment. And she pauses and she sighs. And it's another one of those moments in the show that's slow. And she takes a beat and she says, when the stakes are this high, I have to, which is again, like questioning the Jedi. But it's also very Star Wars to me because these questions of programming come up a lot, especially in recent Star Wars. The clones. I think it's a quote from the Clone Wars. Isn't that what somebody programmed you to believe? And then the whole Bad Batch thing. Ezra questions Kanan and Kanan's teaching. Kanan says, do or do not, there is no try. And Ezra says, what does that even mean? And Kanan says, I don't know. Master Yoda just used to say it a lot. So like Kanan's so indoctrinated, he doesn't even know what he's saying. Hey, if you want to know what do or do not there is no try means, I, for Krypton to Alderaan, interviewed a Buddhism professor a couple years ago, and she explained it to me, how it's actually not super confusing. It means this thing, and George Lucas was influenced by Asian religions and stuff when making Star Wars. So go listen to that. It's fascinating. But anyway, so all of these like questioning the Jedi, which I think is good, right? It's leading to this next generation of maybe more healthy relationship with the Order.
All right, healthy relationship. Ahsoka defeats Marok, and then Shin and Sabine pause, and they're like, oh, what happened? Shin seems kind of distraught over the fact that Marok was defeated, which is interesting. Like, they're obviously, I don't know if she was like, oh, I'm done for, if it's 2 against 1, or if she was just, upset about that loss. And then Sabine just says, go on, Ahsoka. And Huyang told them to stay together, and they'd be together. And Ahsoka, the master, immediately leaves. I would have been more interested if Sabine was like, here's my opportunity to ditch and go save Ezra, and Ahsoka can finish off Shin or something. The whole Anakin, like, I'm going to take him now, just head into the battle, just dive right in. But Ahsoka leaves Sabine behind. I really didn't understand that. I know the stakes are high, that they're trying to get to the map, before the bad guys get to the map sort of thing. But she leaves her Padawan behind.
Ahsoka knows that she's flawed. And we heard it in the first episode when she's talking to Hera. She says something like, Anakin never finished my training. I abandoned him, just like I abandoned Sabine. So she has this regret. And to some extent, she maybe abandoned Sabine again on the battlefield. But she had also just said, sometimes we have to do the right thing regardless of our personal feelings, right? And so she thinks that the right thing is going and stopping the enemy, quote unquote, very like Tolkien language here from Gandalf, the enemy from getting to Thrawn. So I think that plays into this a little bit. And I think that it is also something she is going to end up regretting, abandoning Sabine again, and it leading to this next step where now Sabine is lost, the map is destroyed, and Ahsoka cannot find her unless they pull a Raiders of the Lost Ark from the burn on her hand or whatever.
That map was our last hope. No, there is another.
So I do think that there is a little bit of that wrapped up in there. She believes she's doing the right thing, so she ran off. I think we know that Sabine's no match for Shin. They haven't had a lot of time to continue her training. She did embrace being a Mandalorian, so maybe that should have done better. And really, in the end, she did win against her, but Shin smoke bombed her way out of it. And then Ahsoka's personal feelings come out because she thinks that Shin killed Sabine.
Right. And just like in the last episode, anger is quick to give you power.
Right.
But it messes with your footing. Oh no, when you're on the edge of a cliff, Ahsoka, maybe you should take some of your own damn advice.
That's dope connection. I did not realize that, but that's awesome. Yes, she was quick to anger and it was quick to power, but then she lost her footing. Incredible. That's awesome. And Sabine taking advantage of that moment with Shin when she's distracted by Marok. I don't know if there's like a warrior's honor type thing involved in all of that, or if it just happens so quick, right? Like we see all these things and we're Monday morning quarterback. I don't know what sports are, but I know that that's a phrase in the vernacular.
Well, but if you're fighting someone and they're distracted and you're literally trying to like defeat them, that was her opportunity to like return the favor from being stabbed in episode 1. She had an opportunity, but instead everybody just took a second to like take halftime. So realistically, that didn't make a lot of sense, but
Sports.
They had to separate Ahsoka and Sabine for the story, obviously.
Right. And guess what? And guess what? Marok is nobody.
He's the smoke monster, apparently.
Yeah. He was, I think what they were alluding to was that he was like a reincarnation, Night Sister magic that, if anyone's familiar with the Night Sisters or Jedi Fallen Order, we've seen very similar things. Just a cool thing. And I also love that kind of troll moment from the creators of the show. Like, everyone's going to be wondering who this character is. Well, guess what? He's a puff of smoke.
I think we did that to ourselves, but maybe they wrote that in there as he's nobody. He's nothing. All right. Before we move on to any other left field theories, I want to pick up on a conversation that we put a pin in last week about maybe the music for this scene. I theorized, hey, maybe we get a little Duel of Fates action here, right? Some kind of epic lightsaber battle. We did get a lot of epic lightsaber battle, and we got a lot of really interesting Star Wars music. I'm going to have to say, I love Kevin Kiner, but John Williams is still the master.
Oh, dope. So no Duel of Fates
It's
moment.
still great, and I obviously haven't been listening to it for 20 plus years. So, put that,
Right.
asterisk on it as well.
Yeah.
Music was great. I think what happened was it was the classic Star Wars, like, we're having a lightsaber battle and there's explosions. So there's going to be a lot of cool sound effects, especially with Ahsoka's battle with Baylan. It starts off dead silent and they're just turning around that, whatever that cool little structure is, that temple. They're just walking around that temple, and it's a slow burn to even start the fight. And then the music kind of slowly creeps up and it comes in and out. And they're jumping from different scenes. So no Duel of Fates, but there's some interesting score behind there. Baylan, he's got I don't know if it's like Baylan's theme or if this is intertwined with other parts, but he's got like the Sideshow Bob theme.
no.
He's got a very similar theme to Sideshow Bob, which I love. But that's also like, I guess Sideshow Bob is evil, but he's also intellectual. I'm sure there's no direct correlation between those universes.
Simpsons did it.
Take that for what you will. And the moment where Sabine tries to use the Force, it gets very quiet for a moment, and it's not dun 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 dun, but it is same notes, but a little bit different of a contour, and it's in kind of like a triplet feel rather than like duples. So I know I'm trying to make Duel of Fates a thing in every Star Wars here, like Andor, they've got Marva's March, and there's some similarities there. But I think, you're talking about what's my Star Wars? Like, you got to give us some of those moments. Like, that's something to strive for. If you want to make something that stands the test of time, there's your North Star. Kinder's great. I got to listen to that scene again, see if I can pick up some more little tidbits there. But that's my little rant on the music for this ep.
So that's interesting, and I love this music stuff. So do you think that the thing with Sabine, the musical cue with Sabine, do you think that's meant to be questioning? Like, we were all sitting there questioning, oh, does she have the Force? And it sounds, when you just did it, it sounds like it's oh, I don't know. What is it? Kind of musical cue. Am I reading that correctly?
Well, I think if we wanted to cue into her having the ability, they'd play the like that's perfect for that, to be like, ooh, she's getting there, and then you could abruptly cut it off, even if she doesn't fully tap into it. But that is the classic, like, oh, this is the end for you. That's not a happy theme. This is the Mandalorian thing. Same idea there. It's not really the heroic. It could be a heroic moment, but it's a turning point, not to the positive, I would say.
I love these music conversations. We should have more of the music conversations. Also, I think the title for this episode is now, It's No Duel of Fates.
I love it.
Let's talk about the lightsaber battle. We talked about it a bit, but what'd you think? Did you like it? Were you enthralled?
Dude, okay, so yeah, with Duel of Fates, man, you had the double lightsaber blade with Maul. It's like, whoa, that's pretty darn cool, right? And it was 3 people fighting at once, which was kind of new for Star Wars at that time. I don't think there was any triple lightsaber fights in the original trilogy. And then we got 3 different duels in this episode, right? With an Inquisitor, 2 Padawans, and with 2 Masters. There's nothing to complain about there, and we've already gushed about Baylan. So, yeah, that was great. We're kind of spoiled in that sense.
Just an epic lightsaber battle scene, and I think that that's part of what makes this the Star Wars I've been waiting for. I love the there's tons of emotional stuff in this episode, even when Ahsoka and Baylan are fighting. That fight was so good. The choreography was so good. All of it, like you were saying, their stances and their styles are changing and they're adapting. And she's like got her leg on one of the henge stones and her, like, as she's using them to move off of them and stuff.
Yeah, Ahsoka kind of fights dirty, like she's in like WWE or something and she's putting on the moves.
She takes advantage of the environment, which is a very Anakin, like, raised during the Clone Wars as a Jedi thing.
And if the ref's not looking, you can kick him a couple of times.
Yeah. Simpsons did it. Okay, so with the last little bit of time here, I know we've talked about a lot, but we cannot leave. We cannot hit the stop button on the recorder without talking about the final scene. But let's start with that transition, okay? We've seen lots of wipes in Ahsoka. This transition was one of the greatest things I've ever seen. Panning away from the cliff and they see the ocean, and then it slowly becomes like the world between worlds and Ahsoka lying on the pathway. It's amazing. React more. It was amazing.
It was smooth. Yeah, I was waiting to make my joke. It wasn't a wipe. It was a wave. But that was great because you're like, is she going to just pop up out of the water? Is she going to, you know, pull the Leia Jedi moment and fly floating? Up? Yeah, exactly. You know, and you're wondering what's going to happen next. And then all of a sudden we're no longer in, you know, reality, right?
Oh my God. It's so beautiful. My immediate thought was like, I want to draw this somehow. Like, I want to make art of this transition between the sea and seeing her on the path in the world between worlds. Oh my goodness. Just to be able to think of that is incredible. Like the design of that. Like kudos to whoever came up with the idea for that transition because it worked so well and it's amazing. And we transition into more mystical Star Wars stuff, which is my friggin' jam. So she's in the world between worlds. Have you seen enough of the Clone Wars to feel something when you hear Anakin say, "Hey, Snips"?
I didn't catch that the first time through. I caught it the second time with subtitles on. I think I saw someone tweet that, and I was like, did he really freaking say that? Yeah. No, he did. What hit me in that scene was Ahsoka being like, one, where am I? And then hearing Anakin's voice and her face kind of like everything drops out of it. Like, what? She's genuinely like aghast at that moment. And then they turn around and we see de-aged Hayden Christensen there. So I would like to hear you tee this up before I sprinkle any kind of spice on it.
Okay, let's sprinkle some spice on it. And by spice, I mean love, because that's the secret ingredient to this scene. As someone who the Clone Wars is probably their favorite piece of Star Wars media, hearing the live action version of Anakin, I actually don't know if Matt Lanter's voice was also played in there, who voiced Anakin in the animated stuff. But hearing that and seeing that on screen, I sat up immediately. I got chills. It filled me with all of the feelings. And then to see her in that space, it's the second time she's been in that space. Obviously, not everybody knows that. But she is very confused. She has a very worried look. And then when she says master, and again, it's more drawn out. There's lots of silent space. And she goes to like touch her head like she's confused or she feels weird. And then we hear Anakin say, "I didn't expect to see you so soon." And then she turns around and sees him. Just everything. We knew that Hayden Christensen was going to be in this series. Even up until the last 20 seconds of this episode, if you would have asked me, I would have said we're going to get a flashback. We're going to get a flashback with training or with her leaving him or something like that. We see him as something, Force Ghost, Force Entity, something in the world between worlds, addressing her as Master and Padawan. She says Master and then calls him Anakin. And as soon as she turns around, like you said, her facial features completely changed. She's happy. It was just, I felt so amazing. I felt like, damn, this is Star Wars. This is so good, right? If anyone else out there at that moment just went, "This is so good," let us know. Get in the comments because I was right there with you. So now that I've sprinkled some love on it, I think there is one more thing I want to talk about with it, but we can hold off. Now that I've sprinkled some love, what do you think?
I'm really interested to see what happens next in the conversation. You know, again, that's the stinger for next episode. Is he there to teach her a lesson, or is it just to get a flashback with more context of where Ahsoka's head is at, you know, or why she became the person she is, or how she can better train Sabine? Like, I don't know. You know, this is very interesting to see him show up in this era. The spice that I would sprinkle on this is it's very hard to turn off the part of your brain that knows they've de-aged him to put him in this scene. It's interesting. You're looking at the character moment of like, wow, this is, you know, doing it for me on a story level. And to me, I was immediately thinking production, which took me out of the story. So that's my own darn fault. But, you know, it does look pretty good, and we just got to get used to that they're going to do that, you know? Oh, Tarkin was all CG in Rogue One.
Tarkin looked great, but I think, well, in my opinion, Tarkin looked great, but I think it's because he has a very specific facial structure. So there isn't that kind of uncanny valley smoothness to it. I do think that we've talked about the production quality for this show, and it's quote unquote a low budget production, I think is what it's been called. But in every other sense, I think the production quality has been the Purgle, that again, the transition from the waves to the world between worlds. There's so much stuff that looks so good. George Lucas innovates. Star Wars innovates. He comes up with this technology so that the future of entertainment can have this technology and iterate on it. So it's not perfect yet.
Well, and make no mistake, I don't think it looks bad. And it certainly looks the best it's ever looked. It looks great.
Yes.
I don't mean to comment on the quality of the work, but just the fact that I know it's not just him. And it's the same thing with Ahsoka. Like, she doesn't really have those light goo things or whatever. They've made them look better than they looked in the last thing. Like, they're always improving on it, of course. But just knowing that, I'm like, well, here comes CG Anakin. Or even, if this was CG Yoda or whatever other character, just simply knowing that production fact, I'm thinking about that now rather than the story. It's a muscle we have to develop.
Yeah, I agree. So I also watched it twice. First time I watched it alone. Second time I watched it with Lorelai. I didn't notice it at all the first time because maybe it's because I was seeing blurry at that point. I'm not crying, you're crying type deal. Or maybe it's because I was just so wrapped up in what was happening. I guess those two things are the same. But then when I watched it with Lorelai, she pointed it out. There's also whatever he is, he's Force Ghost or he's embodiment of the world between worlds or whatever. It's not really, maybe this is getting into left field theory territory, but maybe it's uncanny because
it's supposed to look a little odd.
It's not exactly him, or it's the version of him that showed up at the new version of Return of the Jedi at the end, right?
Well, it has to be a version that means something to Ahsoka. It couldn't be the old dude from the original trilogy, original release, right? It has to be Clone Wars era Hayden Christensen, right?
Yeah. Yep. But I overall loved that and cannot wait to see what happens next episode because it's Dave Filoni. They're even releasing episode 5 in select theaters.
Huh.
Did you see that?
No.
Yeah, AMC select AMC theaters in major metropolitan areas in the US. So New York, Philadelphia, nowhere I can justify getting to, unfortunately, or I would 100%. But yeah, it's a big deal and I can't wait to see what happens. The very end. So we see Anakin, and I have feelings. Let me lead you through. Let me lead you through what it was like for me. I see Anakin. I have feelings. He says, "Hey, Snips." I have a lot of feelings. And then cuts to black, and the caption says, "Vader theme plays." And then we hear a little bit of the Imperial March or whatever it is, right? So the rug got swept out from underneath me. I was so happy. And then that happened. And then it's another musical cue that occurs that's well, what does that mean? Right? It's a very cliffhanger, I think, even more than Baylan at the end of last episode, because I'm so confused now about wait, I thought this was good. It's not good? It might be bad? Yeah. So is that something you picked up on first watch, or is that another thing you picked up on the second?
Well, I definitely picked up that it was ominous on the first watch, and then blatantly when they say Vader theme, which you're right, Imperial March, Vader theme. Why? Why is it evil? If he's this redeemed version of Anakin or younger version of Anakin.
Crazy left field theories.
Right. If we want to do a quick left field theory, that seems to be I have been every voice that is in your head. It's one of those moments. It's not who you think it is. It's a, facade.
Yeah. Did you watch the Mortis arc of Clone Wars?
I think so.
I have some crazy left field theories about this, specifically because it says Vader theme at the end. If it didn't say that, I would have been oh, happy times, good stuff, we're going to get something. But then it did that. I was okay, well, is this bad? Could it be the world between worlds manifesting itself in a bad way? Or could it be that Anakin is more representing the father who, in the Mortis arc of the Clone Wars, keeps balance? There's the father and the daughter and the son, and they're kind of like force gods, they're referred to as, but they're force entities. The father keeps balance, the son is bad, the daughter's good. The daughter has more of a connection to Ahsoka and is represented sometimes as her bird, Moray, who's the owl that we see briefly in Mando and suspiciously have not seen in this series yet. And so is Anakin's presence there a representation of the son, who was trying to manipulate Anakin and who represents the dark side of the Force and is trying to manipulate Ahsoka, and that's fallen Jedi, right? Or is it something else? There's a bad vibe, right? Right. And specifically that arc in the Clone Wars is one of my favorites. And understanding that not everyone will have seen that, but it's still going to be a surprise. But that is the most mystical Star Wars has ever been, that arc. It's They fall into this weird planet. Anakin's the chosen one. They put him through these trials to test to see if he's, and it's all like mystical, magical hoo-ha. And it's incredible. And if they do this in this Star Wars, I'm going to be so excited. Those are kind of my crazy left field theories.
Well, we definitely are going to get more of that world. She's not just going to accidentally get sucked out of it, or else they would have done that in this one episode. She has a vision for 1 second and it's gone the next. She's there, and we're going to get more of that. All will be revealed.
I do think that it might also show her the pathway to Peridia. I do think that there will be something in there, because when we see Ezra use this, Ezra falls into the world between worlds several times actually in Rebels. But at the last time he uses it, there are portals that he uses to change the outcomes of certain events. I do think that this might show her the pathway to where she needs to go. Either that she can get to through that, or that she can then know how to get there when she goes back and gets Hera and everything like that. Oh, it's just so amazing. I love this. I love seeing the connections to the animated stuff that I love very dearly. I love seeing the mystical stuff. This is the Star Wars that I have been waiting for. This is the Star Wars you have been looking for.
Yeah, I'm down with that. Although I want to see a Purgle wrapped its tentacles around the ghost, and then we jump off to Peridia.
Let's do it.
That's my theory.
Oh, because the Purgle know how to get there.
Come on, it's got to be the Purgle, right? Questions asked and answered.
Yes. It's cool because on that thing in the Stonehenge that Morgan activates, right, there's a bunch of Purgle that go around that circle. Whereas in Rebels, the pathway, the portal to get into the world between worlds was the Loth Wolves. All of these animals play a very specific role as well. So there, I love it. 10 out of 10. Would watch again. Killing it. I love Star Wars, man.
I agree. What a way to end. We love Star Wars. If you didn't already know. Listeners, we would love to keep this conversation going. Drop us some comments if you're here on YouTube, or hit us up wherever you like to social media or listen to your podcasts. Make sure to hit subscribe for more conversations about Ahsoka and other series. Thank you for listening to the show today. I've been Royce.
I've been the father.
And we've been Krypton.